Sure, let's do it. The plan for tonight, I'll kind of step you through my career journey, and then I'll go a little bit deeper in terms of, kind of how is HR put together, and, kind of what are some of the, the disciplines within, and then go a little bit deeper into recruitment, and then just probably a couple kind of my big, kind of keystone lessons in terms of being a leader in large corporations, and, things that I wish I had kind of had someone share with me earlier on. So that's the game plan, but I'm very agile and will gladly move around based on the appetite of everybody on the call. And so before we get started, there is at the bottom of your Zoom, if you hover your mouse over the bottom of your Zoom, for those who aren't familiar, there's on the far right-hand side, there's a reactions button. And if you click on it, it looks like a smiley emoji with a plus. If you click on it, you see like the clapping hands, thumbs up, etc. So I'd love either through those or through the chat or through just throwing a thumbs up on video. We can do any of those. How many people feel like they know something about what human resources is all about? Just so I can kind of start to level set on kind of. Okay, I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. Awesome, awesome. Thank you. Perfect. And then as I go deeper, how many of you feel like you have a sense of what recruiting and working with recruiters is all about? Maybe as you started looking for jobs, or when you were looking for internships, or maybe you didn't even know, you just know you talked to somebody at the company and you don't even really know what their role was, or were they a recruiter or were they somebody else? Okay, and I see some less, that's to be expected. Some, okay, not as much, less thumbs. Okay, that really helps. That gives me an indication of kind of how to go. But again, this is meant to be useful to you. So if I need to go deeper, or I'm also very fine with, hey, keep us moving. Just kind of give me some feedback, and anytime you feel comfortable, come off and ask a question. So thanks for that. With that, let's go kind of into career journey. And so I'm going to start with my career journey just a kind of a split second before I was an undergrad at UCSB, because it'll have some relevance to how my career journey went. So prior to actually starting my undergrad, I did a high school internship with Kaiser Permanente. And why I lived close, I filled out an application, I was simply selected, there was no kind of interesting networking story involved. And it was something that I thought, oh, well, this was a great kind of paid internship to save up some money before I went off to college, and didn't really think that that would be part of my career story moving forward. So fast forward, got my degree, had a wonderful time at UCSB, loved my comm major. And whereas undergrad, I had good grades, my comm major, I had amazing grades, because when you're studying something you love, it doesn't feel like studying. It's enjoyable. While I was at UCSB, I needed a job, as many of us did, and I actually ended up working at the Student Health Center. And so, kind of parlay number one, I parlayed that Kaiser internship into a job at the Student Health Center, and I was the patient advocate there. In fact, kind of helped them, and so maybe somebody can throw it in the chat. I don't know if they still use the program, but I helped build out the patient advocate program at the Student Health Center, and so that's what I did through college to help kind of support myself. When I graduated, I wanted to stay in Santa Barbara. Who wouldn't? And so I did what most people, well, this is going back, let's be honest, this is going back 20 years. And I was reading the newspaper and looking for jobs, and I ended up securing a job at the Rehabilitation Institute, which is now kind of nestled into Cottage Hospital. And again, parlayed, an internship at Kaiser that was very kind of office focused, to my patient advocate time at the Student Health Center, to the Rehabilitation Institute. And what I did for them there was staffing. And it was basically a job where they taught me how to understand how many patients were in the hospital at any given time. That would tell us how many nurses we would need. And then I was in charge of making sure we had the right amount of nurses for every schedule. And if we didn't have enough nurses available, then I would call kind of nursing agencies that would send nurses over with, fairly short notice. And so, as we go deeper in a few minutes into kind of the different kinds of recruiting and the different kinds of HR, for me, this was my first HR job. It wasn't planned. I didn't set out for it. I didn't graduate saying I'm going into human resources, but rather wanted to stay in Santa Barbara. And this is kind of what allowed me to do that, was to be with that job. And it allowed me to stay down in Santa Barbara for an extra year. As my, at the time, fiance and I thought about what we wanted to do, we ended up wanting to move. I was from the Bay Area and we wanted to go back. He accepted a job with Cisco Systems. And so I needed a job fast, because when Cisco hired my fiance at the time, they gave him about a week's notice to get, up north. And so we moved back up and lived with my family. And so of course, I did the thing I knew. I called Kaiser and said, will you hire me back? And so they said, sure, we'll see you on Monday. So again, not planful, but logistically made sense, and put me back in, a position of employment, basically was the goal at that point. Still didn't really know what I wanted to do with my career. Went through, I was with Kaiser for probably about year or so. And my husband said, this Cisco company is pretty cool. You should come work here. And he put me into their employee referral system. Didn't really know what would come of it. They gave me a call. I went and interviewed, and they hired me to be a recruiting coordinator. And so basically somebody that schedules interviews and handles the kind of administrative back end of a recruitment process. And so that's kind of what led me to high tech. And I really loved it. I loved being in a large corporate environment. I really saw myself growing with the company, spending time there, and really decided that recruitment felt like a great career for me. Helping people find jobs seemed like a really kind of rewarding, fulfilling place to be. And so the plan was to stay there. But so now we're about 1999, and that's about the time that the first .com bubble burst. And I was laid off, and I was actually a contractor at the time, and they were writing up paperwork to convert me to a full-time employee. So literally my paperwork to become a full-time employee of Cisco and my paperwork to lose my contract basically passed each other in interoffice mail. And I got a phone call and said, unfortunately, your contract's over. Thanks so much. And, my husband also worked at Cisco. So I called him, we were commuting. I said, you have to take the rest of the day off because you have to come pick me up and drive me home. And I started the job search again. And again, I just went out, looked at what was kind of open and available. And at that point, I think I was using, Monster.com, I think was popular then to use. And Synopsys, which is another Bay Area tech company, gave me a call. I went and interviewed, and they hired me. Again, found myself happy, found, okay, this is going to be good, nice, rewarding career, see myself with kind of a career path and potential to grow, loved the people I worked with, loved my leadership team. And then we decided that we were going to move out of the Bay Area. And so we decided we were going to move further up north to be closer to snow skiing and water sports and friends, etc. And I was also 5 months pregnant with my first child. And so I was like, okay, I need to kind of hurry up and get a job. And we were trying to buy our first home. So I needed to make sure I could have documented income rapidly if we were going to do this. So I called up a friend and said, hey, what do are you hiring? And again, it kind of didn't matter. I thought, oh, I'm still young, I can try things out. And his job was that he managed dental offices. It was like a dental management firm that helped dental offices be managed. And he said, yeah, come interview with us. And so I thought, random, but sure, fine. I needed a job quickly so we could move. We'd found a house we wanted, and I needed to secure employment for us to be able to buy the house. So I took the job. I was working at that job, and then obviously was going out on maternity leave, but that was a job that I found I did not like. For lots of reasons, I didn't like the job, but I decided I would stick with it. until I could get on maternity leave, and I would use maternity leave to look for something new. But what's really interesting, and the reason I share some of these kind of more mundane details, is what was really interesting about that job was not the job, but the people I met. And one of the people that I worked with, one of my colleagues there, had worked at Microsoft in recruitment. And she had thought she was going to try something new, kind of similar story, and she was moving. And so her and I were both doing this job that we decided wasn't for us. And maybe we would go back to recruitment at some point. But she had worked at Microsoft. So nothing kind of came of it. We just had a lovely conversation. I ended up, after maternity leave, going to Intel and working with Intel doing contract recruiting, until one day, the friend from the dental management firm called and said, "Hey, Microsoft's hiring. Do you want to talk to them?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk to Microsoft. That's a great idea." Spoke with them, did interviews, and was hired as a contract. We call it a sourcer, and I can get into it later. Basically, sourcing, it's the folks that go out and look for talent, basically scrubbing LinkedIn, trying to find the right profiles for the right open jobs, and the recruiters are the ones that kind of take in the talent, interview them, make offers, that sort of thing. And we'll get into it in a little bit. But they hired me to be a contract sourcer. Now, the hitch with that was I was living outside Sacramento, where I still live now. Microsoft was headquartered in Redmond. This was about 2004, and working remotely was still more of an exception to the rule. And so they said, we're going to offer you a contract role, but we want to let you know we probably could never make you a full-time employee because you work remotely. And I said, okay, well, let's see. Maybe I'll prove myself. So I came in, worked really hard. And of course, they said, you know what, you're doing a great job. We want to hire you full-time remotely. So that was, kind of breaking a little bit of glass. And so, but they said, but you can't manage clients because you don't live in, Redmond, Seattle, where Microsoft was headquartered. So I said, okay, well, let's just see how that goes. And worked really hard, and they gave me clients, and I managed clients remotely, which again, broke a little more glass. So then, as time progressed, I decided I really wanted to try my hand at management. And they said, well, you're remote, so we don't really know about you managing a team of people in Redmond when you're far away, but we'll let you interview and we'll see what happens. So I interviewed, I got the job, and really worked hard to prove myself. So I was one of the first remote managers in recruitment for Microsoft. And, time goes by, conversation comes up, and I said, if you have aspirations to be a director or to be a leader here, you should think about relocating your family. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to relocate. My family and I are really happy where we live. I've kind of pushed through these other barriers before. So, let's see if you reevaluate your position. And they did. And so I was able to be one of the first remote directors at Microsoft, and then kind of fast forward from there. What's ironic about that is now with COVID, we all work remotely. We've proven that it can be done. It certainly has its challenges that are unique. But, over my time at Microsoft, that became much more normal, to the point where when I left Microsoft last year, it was very, very common. My team was based all over the place that I managed. And, I had several remote managers underneath me. So it's interesting how it evolves. And I think just for me, it was, lessons learned before I get to that last jump in terms of where I am now, where, the network mattered, being able to leverage any small parts of my experience to get my foot in the door at somewhere else, and then being able to just to kind of prove myself and then accomplish what they told me I couldn't accomplish up front. And so for me, that's been rewarding. And I'll get into the recruiting part of my profession in a second, but I'll just wrap up thinking about my career journey with, I've been happy at Microsoft. I was there almost 16 years, had plenty more I could do there, more opportunities. But I got a call from this company that I frankly hadn't really heard much about, called Cruz. And, as a recruiter, I take the calls because I'm basically thinking if their recruiter's any good, I'm going to try and hire them for my team. So I basically take the call with a little bit of deceptive motives. It's common in our practice of recruiting. And as I started talking to them, I was intrigued, and I thought, I can keep doing what I'm doing at Microsoft. There'll always be new challenges. It's an amazing company to work for. I still consider Microsoft family for me, but I could also go to a smaller startup and cutting edge technology where they're building self-driving cars. And I could now build something I've been a part of for so many years, and I could build it myself. So over time, and it was probably a year's worth of conversation, I ended up leaving Microsoft, my home, if you will, back in November to start a new adventure at a very small company and to basically build my own recruiting organization and help take that company to scale the way I had helped kind of grow with Microsoft. And so before I go any further, that's my journey. Let me pause. Questions on that? And I'm going to change my view of my Zoom so I can also see the chat. Have you had
one question?
Yeah, I see that. Have you had contact with Kaiser at all since high school? It's a great question, Richard. So I have kept in touch to this day with my manager from Kaiser. Occasionally, when I still lived in the Bay Area, I would pop in and say hi to people. And then when I moved out of the Bay Area, of course, that became a little harder. I think I've popped in twice when I've been in the Bay Area for other reasons, but I still exchange Christmas cards with my boss from Kaiser all these years ago. And I had the same boss before I left for college that I did when they gave me a job after I left UCSB. All right, Scotty, I'll read it more for the recruiting discussion. Advice with regard to new grads reaching out to recruiters. What's the best way to engage them? LinkedIn, email, quick message, detailed message. If they don't hear back, should they be persistent? What can they do to stand out, etc. Perfect. Absolutely, we'll cover it. I think what I'll do, Scotty, is I'll kind of build a little bit of a bookshelf for the recruiting piece. And then I will absolutely go into this in as much depth as we need to. So Alex, if you wouldn't mind switching slides. I'm one of those people that always likes the context. I don't know if you all remember from like grade school English classes, like the keyhole where you start broad and you kind of get down to the narrow bits. That's always the way my brain kind of works. And so what I thought might be helpful before I dive into recruiting and get into some of the things that will help you with job search is just and I'll do it fast unless somebody tells me they want me to go deeper, is when we think about human resources, what are all the pieces involved? And I'm not going to go through all of these pieces, but I just wanted to at least provide a view of all the different elements of human resources, and then also some of the partners that I partner with every single day based on the work that I do in recruitment. And the reason I think that that's intriguing is, I will never run out of career options. I will never run out of ways to kind of transfer to something new because I spend my day interacting with all parts of the company every day. And so, there's been many points where I could think about, do I want to parlay over to marketing? I spend a lot of time with the marketing team. Do I want to jump over and work in something like government affairs, philanthropy, et cetera? And so one of the things I really appreciated about being in human resources is because I have such broad exposure to everything going on in the company and broad exposure to all the different groups in the company, I keep a pretty vast and intriguing network as a result of that. Any questions on kind of broad HR? And I know that font's a little small, it's hard to get onto the slide. I'm happy to field them, or I'm happy to kind of dig more into the recruiting piece that might help all of you.
Do you think that like a lot of these positions are like versatile, where you can just like kind of start at one part, like sales, for example, and then eventually go over to marketing if you show interest or something, depending on the company?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do believe that. And I think for me, I've stayed in recruiting by choice, not because I had to. And I do think that that is the benefit of spending, I think there's always the options. You can spend a lot of time in a company and you can have a lot of different careers within one company, or you can get different work experience by going from company to company. And I've certainly done it both ways. But I do see a lot of kind of internal movement. And in fact, if anyone reads any of the LinkedIn articles that are out there, every year LinkedIn puts out a work, what do they call it? Workplace trends, I believe is what they call the research study that they do. And I actually was just reading it for work last night. One of the trends that they expect to see increase starting this year in 2021 is internal movement, meaning instead of going outside for talent, they move their employees around within the company. And I saw it a ton at Microsoft. It's one of the things we used to sell candidates on, is come in and try a bunch of different careers, and think about from a company's perspective that having somebody that you already know, that has proven themselves, that understands the company, and then all you're doing is teaching them a new discipline, it's actually really attractive to the company as well as to somebody who would like a variety of experience. So great question. Let's see, Ashley, how would someone interested in university relations hiring students or working with students get other student programs to step into the field? That's a great question. So I think when, and Alex, if you'll flip ahead, I'm going to answer this question, and I'll start to use the visual around just kind of the parts of recruitment. And this just looks at the process of recruitment, which I think will also help with some of these questions in a few minutes. But to answer Ashley's question, it'll probably parlay into a couple of these other ones. I think that when you think about university recruiting in particular, that is a place where, coming fresh out of school, we often target newer grads to work in university recruiting. And when I think about my time at Microsoft, where we had a very large university recruiting team, one of the benefits was folks that had recent experience in college that could relate to the university candidates. And I think that, that's a benefit if it's something you're interested in. In terms of how you think about working for those programs, at a company the size of Microsoft, they're always going to post those positions. They're always going to share those on their website. They might even be offering, like, I know with all of our university programs when I was at Microsoft, we would offer virtual events where you could learn about the opportunities at Microsoft as an intern or as a new grad. And that's one route. The other route, and I mentioned a few different times where I was a contract employee, but when we think about recruiting, and I've talked with probably 6 or 8 kind of current UCSB students at different points that have reached out to me, that have asked questions about recruiting. And recruiting does hire a lot of folks as contractors first. So one thing I always tell people is also find out what recruiting or what agencies those companies use, because a lot of times they'll start their team as contractors and then convert them. And I've done that now 2 or 3 times in my career. It's how I came to Microsoft, and I started as contract. So there's really 2 doors in. I think we'll get into Scotty's question around being engaged and how to demonstrate interest. But I think when it comes to both recruiting and specifically university recruiting, it's both on their job sites, or their career site, as well as understanding kind of what companies work with them. And the easy way to find that is, if you're running a search just out on LinkedIn for open jobs, you might see it posted, and then you'll see what company posted on their behalf. And if I need to deep dive, just pop back in the chat or come off mute. Some of the benefits and shortcomings of working in an established company like Microsoft versus a smaller startup like Cruz. Alyssa, I'm living it right now. I'm just quickly becoming an expert on this answer. Benefits of Microsoft. So very big, tons of career opportunity. I can move around because there's 3,000 open positions at any one time. Tons of resources. For everything I did, I had a team. I had a team to do my talent marketing. I had a team to run my events. I had a team to run my intelligence. I had big, giant teams to do everything because we were heavily resourced and we were working at a very, very large scale. Some of the challenges you can imagine that come with that is it's a little harder to navigate. I think in my time at Microsoft, 100,000 employees, people say, oh, you work at Microsoft, do you know so-and-so? And I've worked there 15 years. No, I've never met that person. So you don't get interaction with everybody because it is so big. It is a little bit harder to figure out who owns what if you want to either explore new roles or drive a project idea. Sometimes it takes a little bit of footwork to figure out who's who. Now contrast that with Cruz. Smaller. I have a meeting with the CFO tomorrow night. I've met with every kind of engineering leader at least twice in the time I've been there. I've met with the heads of every single department, and I meet with them on an ongoing basis. And I can do that because it's smaller and there's less people to kind of get through to meet. When I have an idea, I can make an idea move very quickly. And I've already been able to implement a few ideas since I've been there because there's less people that I have to loop in with in order to see the idea driven forward. Now that also means I don't have a full marketing team at my disposal the way I did, and specifically a talent marketing team. So I'm partnering with the Cruz marketing team to do some work for recruitment, but I don't have my own team in place that focuses just on recruitment marketing. I don't, I can't call somebody whose job it is just to like put together all of my big presentations for big meetings, right? So it's a little bit more agile, which doesn't bother me in the least. It's fine for me, but it is different, whereas I had a team of people that just kind of supported me every day. A lot of it, I just roll up my sleeves and get scrappy, but I'm enjoying that piece of it. Oh, so you've seen the internal movement at Hulu as well, Justin. Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, watch. We're going to see it be more and more interesting. Alex, we have a recruiter dedicated to internal movement. Yep, Microsoft just implemented a full kind of internal recruiting process and team right before I left that they hadn't had for quite a while. How did I move into management at Microsoft? Christy, and I won't forget about your question, Scotty. Christy, I think how you move into management at any company has probably a similar theme, and I know we have other folks on the call that are also managers, so please feel free to weigh in. But what I would say is that there's two pieces to it. You obviously have proven results in the job you're in as an individual contributor. And there are some natural leadership skills that show through regardless if you're managing people or not. In my short time that I've been at Cruz thus far, I've identified 5 people on my team that are natural leaders, that are not managers, that I've either already approached or will approach at the right time to say, have you considered a management role? One of them, ironically, that I identified before I could even say something to him, reached out to me and said, you have an open manager role on your team. I'd like to apply. And I said, oh, good, because I would like for you to. And we ultimately ended up giving him the job. And what I mean by natural leadership is, and it probably ties to some of the things we'll talk about in a few minutes, but easiest way to talk about natural leadership in my mind, when you see something, say something and offer a solution. So in any job you're doing, there's going to be pieces that go really well and really smooth, and there's going to be pieces that are wonky or broken or could be better. And so natural leaders will say, I had somebody do this today. They slacked me and said, hey, Jamie, I have a really great idea that I think will help us. Here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Here's my idea. What do you think? And I said, great idea. We're going to meet next week. We're going to see what we can do to get that idea off the ground. So she brought me a problem and she brought me a solution, and she wanted to drive that solution. So she's going to drive that initiative, which is going to be an opportunity for me to see her in action in terms of leading the initiative. And when I think about management is all about taking roadblocks out of people's way, connecting the work of more than one person, and being able to kind of drive a program, a group of people, or a project to an end result. And so for me, proving myself in my role as a recruiter, always offering to help problem solve on things, always helping to help train the new people, that is what started to kind of line me up as a manager candidate. Another question I had, did you experience any discrimination as a woman? And if so, how did you navigate those challenges? Only once, and it was a very long time ago. It was at Microsoft, which is interesting because now I consider them one of the most inclusive, wonderful places to be. And it was a boss I worked for. He said, okay, so are you, and I think it was when I was interviewing for my first manager role, and he was a really tough guy. I like him. I just talked to him a couple months ago, but he said, are you sure you want to do this? You have 2 young kids. Do you want to just hang out on the mommy track? Like maybe just kind of take it easy. Like, are you sure you want to take on management right now? His intention was good. He meant it in a really positive way. He was watching out for me. but it didn't feel good. It felt really awful, actually. And I subs at the time, frankly, and this was a long time ago before we talked about kind of discrimination against women in the workplace. But at the time, I was actually too intimidated to say, hey, that felt terrible. So at the time, I didn't say anything. I just said, nope, I'm good. But later, I actually did give them the feedback and said, you know what? You know, a few years back, you did something that really made me uncomfortable and really, you know, made me feel like I was being kind of put into a specific box. That's the only experience I've had being discriminated against as a woman. So I've been very lucky, and I do look for companies that are proactive in wanting diverse perspective, diverse candidates, diverse backgrounds and experiences. Let me jump back, Scotty. I'm just gonna scroll up.
Jamie, just to give you a quick time check, we're about 10 minutes out from the close. We could obviously stay a few minutes, but
Scotty's, yep, because I thought Scotty's might be the one. So regarding reaching out, so the best way to engage, there is no silver bullet for engaging teams or recruiters. It varies, and I wish that it was an easier answer. I feel like you do them all. If you get an email address, you use it. You send a LinkedIn message. I think in terms of quick versus detailed, this is what you should tell somebody. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I think I offer in terms of value, and this is how I'd like to proceed. The biggest thing I see people miss, even my own friends or my own people in my network, is they say, Jamie, here's my resume. Can you help me find a job? Tell me what you're looking for. I can interpret your resume 15 different ways. What is it you want to do? If you're reaching out, say, I'm interested in this job you have posted, or say, you don't have a job posted, but I'd really love to work on your university recruiting team. And it doesn't take more than, you know, a couple of very brief paragraphs to convey, and this is what I already bring to the table. And when you think about what you bring, it's not telling them what they can see on your LinkedIn profile, because they can read that. It's the thing that maybe they don't understand. What you may not understand about the job that I do working at the UCSB is that I manage people, or I manage the schedule, or I have to show leadership because of this, or I help find the new employees for the UCSB and I should be a university recruiter, right? So tell them why the things that you're doing would apply. What can they do to stand out? You know, it's always funny. I think candidates feel like they want to, what's the word I want? They don't want to show their cards. They don't want to look too interested. I disagree with that. And so what I would say is, if you're really excited about a company, tell them you're excited. I was really excited about Cruz. I turned down the first job they offered me because I said, I'm really excited about the company, but I don't want this job. So tell a company when you're excited and get to know the company. I'm impressed. I interviewed 2 candidates today, and they both had done some homework and they asked me really great, hard questions about the company. Well, what is your competitive advantage here? Where do you think the company is struggling? And here's why I'm asking. So it showed they'd done their homework and they had a true deep interest in the company, and they scored points with me for that today. Scrolling down. All right, I caught up all the questions with more time to go. Please feel free to come off mute, put more in the chat if you'd like. I can also continue to kind of talk through. These are just some of the things that I thought be really helpful, like go inside a recruiter's brain. This is how we look at our work. This is how we look at the phases of our work, from finding the talent to getting in touch with them to like selling to them, because when you're in an interview, never forget that you're interviewing the company too. They're not just interviewing you. You have to decide you want to be there, to making offers, and then to kind of how we train people. And so you can see where the different uses, different ways we find talent. Sourcing, as I told you, is just the name of the practice of looking for talent. We all know about the job boards of LinkedIn. Definitely universities are a huge source of talent. Community partnerships. Sometimes you may find that you're doing nonprofit work that can end up finding you a job, and a paid job. This is how we go about engaging talent. We hold events, I mentioned, employee referrals, I mentioned. Marketing is a huge piece, telling our story, and then of course just reaching out to folks. Evaluating and selling. This might be helpful too. So part of my job as a recruiter is to sell somebody on the job even before I'm sure we want to offer it, in case I do want to offer. And it's also answering tough questions from candidates. And so we welcome kind of thoughtful, tough questions, as I said a second ago. We also use interviews to myth bust. You may be talking to a company and you may have said, hey, I saw on Glassdoor this. Is that true? Well, no, actually, here's the story, or yeah, it's true, and this is what we're working on. And so I do think about those times to be good for myth busting and tough questions. Is it harder for international students to find a job? I think that depends on a couple of things. It depends on the company's ability to secure visas and immigration. So bigger companies have very large immigration teams. It depends on current legislation. We know 2020 had a lot of really challenging kind of ups and downs in our immigration policies. That doesn't matter how big your company is, there were points at Microsoft where we were challenged by our immigration policies. It depends on if the company is global, right? So do they have the ability to hire in multiple locations if they can't secure the proper visas and immigration? And then it depends on the company's ability to pay for all those things because they're very expensive. At Cruz, for example, we just moved outside of the US in the last 6 months. I just hired a recruiter in Munich, Germany this morning. And so we're just now kind of going into a foray. So, you know, that changes my ability because even if the international student is here on a student visa, their ability to have like a subsequent visa, like an H-1B, for example, is dependent on the skill set. And for a company to secure an H-1B and subsequently a green card for a candidate depends a lot on the jobs that we're hiring for. Much easier to do for an engineering role than it is, say, for a human resources role. So I think that starts to talk about where is it easier for an international student to consider, and I'm happy to follow up. I know we're going to run out of time in a second. I'm happy to take a couple more questions, but I also want to make sure Alex gets to wrap the way we need to. If I didn't get all of your questions answered, you did receive an email from me last evening with my work email address. You're welcome to email me with your questions. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you didn't already. Some of you have over the last few days. You know, I'm happy to kind of expand on the answers. Alex, I can take more, or I can hand it back to you.
Thank you, Jamie. What I'll do is just a soft close, and then we'll see if there's any, you know, a couple more questions. We did that last time. It worked really well. So let me just go back in the slides here and remind you all of our upcoming 2 virtual career series after this. For those of you that do have to jump off right at the 45 mark. So February 10th, Careers in Tech. John Bolin and myself will be talking about how to translate a career in comm into the IT or more technical field. And then March 10th, we'll have Careers in Advertising with Alexei. Works at Publicis Media, and we would love to see you at both of those. You can register via Eventbrite. There will be listservs going out, so I encourage you to attend both of these as well. And then we're going to be stacking up the rest of the year with more of these fun gatherings, as well as a spring event that will also be virtual. So thank you very much to those of you that joined tonight. We're going to be sending out a short survey. It's like 4 questions. Please fill it out, help us improve the events going forward. And with that, I will stop sharing here.
Actually, Alex,
and if anyone,
sorry, if you go back and just,
yeah,
if we don't get another question, will you just hit slide 6 of our deck? It's the one.
Of course, let me get to it. Lessons from leadership.
And then if there's more questions that come up, I'll take them. But otherwise, this is how I'll wrap us.
Perfect.
Perfect. What the one thing I tried to think about is in, you know, leading in large corporations, there was kind of 3 things that I thought would be really useful. One is the best way to shine in any company or to work with any partner or stakeholder is to think about what's in it for me, but from their point of view. So every time I meet a new partner, every time I engage in a new initiative, I always think about what's in it for them. And that's what I lead with, even if it's something broken, right? So, hey, this isn't going well. What's in it for them to make this better? I always lead with what's in it for them. When I think about how I build trust with partners, I always remember that anywhere in the company, we all have the same business objective. And that what I have to do is I have to use my expertise to contract with those partners to build a plan to get feedback and results so that we can meet the same business objective. And so I kind of created this little slide, but I have a really tough meeting tomorrow with some executives, and I'm going to start with, we have the same objective, but here's my part in this and my expertise. Here's my plan. This is what I'm contracting with you to do. You can give me some feedback, and then as we get results, you'll build trust in me, since obviously I'm new to that company. And then I saw this quote from Barack Obama that I just thought was the best thing ever. Never be afraid to ask questions. He was our president, and he asked questions every day. And this is the one I love. Like, questions are not a sign of weakness. Asking for help is a sign of really humble confidence in my mind. And so asking for help, asking questions is, even for leaders, we always have to remember that we're not expected to know it all.
Love that. Thank you so much, Jamie. If anyone has any final questions, it sounds like Jamie, you'd be willing to stay on for a couple of minutes to take them. If anyone has to jump off, we'll conclude formally there, but please feel free to jump off and mute, ask your questions, or pop them in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jamie?
Looks like we already got one from Jasmine. How does working in the HR field, relate to data and analytics?
Thank you. And it's scrolling. Yes. Actually, it's very, very tightly related. In that same LinkedIn Trends report, people data and analytics is one of the most I forget the exact stat on it, but it is one of the most growing fields, because everything we do, we have to be able to track and understand, is our result good, bad, or indifferent? How is it trending over time? And so every HR organization builds some size of data analytics into it. I literally am spending my Friday for 2 hours with our people analytics team to build out a new dashboard to understand the health of our recruiting process, so that we can say, where is it going well? Where do we have a problem? The data tells me where the problem is, and then I can dig into that data to start to solve the problem. So that it's actually a really rapidly growing field. And whenever the HR data analyst in the room speaks, everybody stops and listens. I think somebody started to come off mute too and had a question.
That was me. Sorry, I was interrupting, but I have a question regarding like getting a job, I guess, because I didn't graduate as a comm student. I graduated as a music student, but I was still interested in jobs in this field and like HR and et cetera. And I was just wondering if like having this major is going to kind of block me, because I see so many of these applications saying that we like really want a communications, journalism, like marketing, et cetera, like kind of major to come in here and experience with that. So from my experience, kind of understanding this and taking some of the intro classes to communications, how can I kind of go about like getting these jobs or getting an interview?
Yeah, so a couple things you can always list on your resume at the bottom under your education, the communication classes you have. What that does to help you is that often when recruiters are looking for resumes, they're running keyword searches, which means by having your communications classes on your resume, you will pop up in their keyword search. That at least gets you into the stack of resumes that gets read. So that's number one. The next thing is there is a trend that companies, as basically the demand for talent is outpacing in several areas: computer science, probably communication at this point. I don't know all of them off the top of my head. The demand is outpacing the supply of talent coming out of school with those degrees. And so you are seeing companies get more and more flexible about degrees, types of degrees. And so what I would say is your job becomes, how do you just get them to notice your resume? Might be as easy as putting those comm classes on there. How do you demonstrate any sort of experience you have that shows some sort of connection to HR? So, kind of what we talked about before. Did you, help train the new people, for example, at your job? That would be an example of that. And so I think that's another one. And then having conversations with people. We didn't go deep on networking, and I know we have in other forums with the council, but every person you talk to is a possibility, and they may not be the one that has the job. But at the end of every conversation, you say, who would you recommend I talk to? And one of those times it's going to be somebody that gives you a job. And so if you keep having conversations with people in the HR field, you will start to build a network of people that get to know you, and then the degree will become less important in terms of what it is.
I guess a question on top of that, how can I properly find like more experience or something to be more prepared for these kinds of jobs? Because it seems like that's also another thing that I love to do, but it seems like it's kind of like out of reach, or I don't like kind of understand where to start, I guess.
When I used to work career fairs a long time ago, I'd get this a lot. It's like, I need experience in order to get a job, but I can't get a job because I don't have experience. It's really common. Here's the thing, all experience counts, right? I wrote my 16-year-old son's resume about 4 months ago with him, and it was things like pet sitting and doing yard work for neighbors. It all becomes in how you demonstrate the transferable nature of your skills. And so the job doesn't have to be the perfect HR job in order to show experience. What instead you do is explain to them how it's relevant. So, hey, for my 16-year-old son, it's the silliest example. It's the one that came to mind. Like, having to do pet sitting, people had to trust him to show up when they weren't there, and he showed responsibility, right? To do yard work, he had to be not afraid of hard work. He had to be there really early in the morning, and he had to be there till the job was done, and typically the homeowner wasn't around to supervise it. And so things like that. Now, those are really silly examples compared to some of the things you guys will be putting on your resume, but don't discount any work experience you have as not being valuable.
Got a question in the chat from Richard. If you have time, oh, that's not part of the question. If you have time, Jamie, you have time. Did you ever find UCSB being a research university problematic when it came to having specific skills?
So Richard, you might want to jump off me and clarify. I never found the fact that UCS being a research university problematic to having specific skills. In fact, if anything, I have always found, and being a recruiter, I know this to be true, my UCSB degree helps me all the time. It's actually very prestigious. University recruiting teams actually tier out universities based on the caliber of talent that they graduate. And as a recruiter, even though UCSB is my alma mater, as a recruiter, it is one of our top schools that we look at. And so, never has UCSB a hindrance. In fact, I feel very, very fortunate to have it on my resume. And I know that from being a recruiter where we target UCSB.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You bet. Best way, trusted resources to identify industry pay scales and expected salary ranges for positions, particularly when discussing income, remains relatively taboo. Okay, great question, Justin. Discussing income should not be taboo. If you are working with an actual recruiter, they typically are trained to discuss compensation. My recruiters are trained to do it. If you're working with a recruiter inside a company, they are not incentivized to save money, little known fact. So if you tell them, I want to make $20,000 a year and the job pays 40, they're not going to pay you 20, they're going to pay you 40. They're going to pay you what the job pays. You should think of them as your advocate when you're talking about compensation. There are laws that vary by state. In California, you do not have to tell somebody what you currently make, but you can tell them what you hope to make, and you should. And it's always a negotiation. And some companies have a way of saying, like, this is our only offer, and they're very serious and they mean it. In other places, they're going to make you an offer and there might be some room to negotiate. It's always a little harder I can't give you a blanket rule to know how to, when each scenario applies. But you should feel like you can talk with a recruiter about it. If you don't have a recruiter, and to go back to your question in terms of places you can look yourself, I find Glassdoor to be fairly accurate. It's obviously going to be more thematic, so you can't rely on it down to a very big detail. I also would use that as an opportunity when you're doing networking calls, when you're learning about a field, when you're exploring a company, ask in generalized terms. Don't ask, what would my job pay, but give me a sense. Like, what is an entry-level role in recruiting look like? Okay, so the coordinators start out at, I'm making this up at the moment, 50,000 a year, and our sourcers start at 75,000, and our recruiters start at 85,000. Things like that, when you're on a call with somebody doing a networking call, they should feel fine to kind of share with you the ranges. I know if somebody asked me, I would tell them. How flexible is this when you're hired as an intern and then offered a full-time position? Ashley, really great question. It is a little bit less flexible because they're doing this in volume, and there's reasons that they want to pay their interns and their new grads very comparably. Can you imagine starting at a company and maybe negotiating is not one of your skill sets, and you start and you find out somebody who was a really just great negotiator, it was just kind of in their DNA, negotiated $10,000 more a year than you, you'd feel really awful for starting out in your company. University recruiting teams typically are very structured in terms of how they do their compensation. When I was at Microsoft, I had an intern working for me that then we made a full-time offer to, and I loved him. I thought he was great. He's still at Microsoft. He's amazing. I would have paid anything to ensure I had him on my team, but it was very structured. It was basically pre-decided, because what if I was a really generous manager and was willing to pay more, and somebody in another team didn't have the budget I had and was going to pay less? So with interns and new grads, there's a lot less flexibility, especially in larger companies. They typically have it figured out before you go in. Great question.
That it? We kind of wrapping up with the questions. These were great. Thank you so much for the participation. Anything final here?
Just first of all, thanks for having me chat today. The thing about jobs that you'll always remember, you will land in a great place. The path isn't always clear. That's why I spent so much time on my journey. My path wasn't clear when I started my journey, and it kind of weaved about, but it all works out. And please, just whenever you're interviewing, remember you're interviewing the company too. Never take it as a moment that you have to try and be the best version of you in order to get a job. I want everyone to interview with who they truly are, and you'll land in the place that's absolutely meant for you.
Great advice. All right, we will have this recording posted on the website. And Jamie, would you mind if we sent out the slide deck, the slides? I know there was some linking.
Not at all. I made them. Okay. I made those up myself. They're not proprietary.
We will send them out to attendees. Jeanette, we can work on that in our maybe with the survey or something. But thank you again, Jamie. This is wonderful.
Thanks. I'll have